What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to That's Delivered. I'm your host, Trucking Ray. We have another episode here for you today. We're going to talk about real freight, real experiences from people actually living this industry. Today, I've got Jason Mischica with me, a freight broker based in Minnesota who's dealt firsthand with freight fraud, cargo theft, and the challenges of trying to build something legit in a market that isn't always fair. We're going to talk about what he's seen, what he's learned, maybe even the hard way, and what people need to understand if they're thinking about getting into the freight brokering business. Jason, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate you. Let's start from the beginning. How you doing today, Jason?
Good, good. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, looking forward to it. And I tell you what, you're hitting on some key topics. Ironically enough, over the
Right.
last 4 days, been dealing with a situation
Oh no!
directly related to what you're talking about. So we actually just got it all sorted out. So it's
Wow.
you know, anytime we start getting into freight fraud, double brokering, obviously theft of loads, um, alarm bells kind of go off everywhere. So we have some pretty specific processes that we follow and folks that we reach out to make sure we're covering all our bases on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, man, that's crazy. It's almost going to be a daily thing because of how much people are getting involved and thinking that, hey, this is the way to go. That I can just steal this freight and nobody cares except for the ones that are affected. That
Yeah.
nothing will happen to me. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's become pretty rampant. So, what would you like me to start with first? You want to talk a little bit about kind of how I got into this business, or do we want
Yeah.
to talk about specifics? Yeah,
So,
so
what's your
just to give you,
background?
yeah, so I actually worked in the LTL industry for years and years, starting in 2000. Let's see, 2004. Yeah, 2004. Started out at Yellow, which became part of YRC Freight or YRC Worldwide. Worked in operations there for 10 or 11 years. And I just got a message from a hockey coach saying, I got time to talk now. I'm like, oh, you're out of luck, pal. Um, so worked there in operations for about 11 years, then moved over to the sales side, customer side, and worked with customer service as well as sales with YRC for an additional, I want to say 4 years, something like that. So
Wow.
let's see, until 2017. So yeah, no, probably about 3 years on that side. So anyway, ended up running into my current company during that time. Um, my parent company, Stein Industries, was doing projects and they were running projects and things like that with YRC. So they were a customer of mine. And as I got to know their logistics folks better, they eventually ended up offering me a position as we started to build out 10 logistics. So one thing led to another, and here I am now. So our company, essentially, the best way to describe it is was the logistics department of our sister companies. And quite a while back, somebody along the way said, "Hey, you know what? Let's start doing this for other folks outside of our four walls." So they got it all set up, and I've been there since 2017, and it's been a great run, great company to work with. The folks that we work with our parent organization are fantastic, and it's been a lot of fun. Kind of like building a startup within a 110-year-old parent company. So kind of
Wow.
the best of both worlds, so to speak. So it's been a cool ride. But kind of related to what you were talking about at the intro, obviously as we have built out our company and made sure that we have protections in place and vetting processes in place and just obviously protecting ourselves and our customers, as well as the other carriers that we work with, from this type of activity is a huge part of the industry and seems to become more so every day, for
Wow.
sure. So
Okay.
yeah, absolutely.
So, on the lines of guidance, who's helped you along the way, or did you kind of figure out on your own?
So on the brokerage side, obviously a lot of folks, kind of like you and I met, right? So we met through a mutual friend in the industry. And I actually have a lot of folks that I connect with that way, right? Whether they were current or former customers, current or former employees. So, for instance, we've had three different company presidents over the last 8 years, in
Wow.
different, differing situations. And I talk to those guys almost on a weekly basis. I mean, there's a lot of collaboration that goes on, even though they're no longer with our organization. You know, we talk about industry trends. We talk about how are we making sure we're protecting ourselves from risk. Um, and then, obviously doing research with places like TIA, with Freight Waves, a lot of great information out there on a regular basis. Transport Topics has stuff all the time, right? So we're always looking to sharpen the sword and make sure that we're being vigilant about just staying current. And that's a huge key, right? Is can't always wait for information to come to you. You got to seek it out. So as I'm sure most of the folks in your audience are listening to this for a reason, right? So
That's right. So
yeah.
what's a day look like? For you, a typical day. Walk us through that for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So in my current role, so I'm the director of sales for our organization. So most of my time is spent interacting with customers, whether they be prospective customers or customers we currently work with, making sure their needs are being met, seeing if there are new opportunities for us to strengthen those relationships, build those out even further. Um, and then, obviously looking for new business on a regular basis. My role is a little bit fluid in that I end up interacting with our operations pretty significantly as well. Obviously, being there the whole time and knowing everybody, um, so it can depend on the day, right? Some days I'm wearing an operations hat more so, and other days I'm wearing the sales hat. So it just depends on what we're dealing with on a day to day, week to week basis, and what we've got scheduled out. So, um, kind of what I was alluding to earlier, we actually had a breakdown last week. Unfortunately, the tractor that our carrier was utilizing had a pretty major mechanical malfunction, put him out of service. He was lucky enough to be able to limp it to a truck stop, like a pilot. And so we had to get a wrecker in, cage the brakes, pull it away from the trailer. At a certain point, we had some alarm bells going off because the carrier stopped communicating with us. And
Hmm.
that's really where we start raising some flags, right? Like, so that's, in speaking about like freight fraud as an example. So my team brought that to my attention right away. Obviously, I'm the one that interacts the most with the customer. And so I was communicating with the customer, as well as then my team and I were communicating with the carrier as much as we could get them to respond. But that's where, we start elevating the level of concern, right? Is when we stop getting communication. So on a day like that, obviously most of my attention shifts from where normally I might be, calling possible customers or talking to existing customers on the phone or setting up meetings and those kind of things. We're doing stuff like this even. My attention then immediately shifts away because timing is of the essence, right?
Yeah.
So that's an example where that's a little bit of an out of the ordinary day.
Right.
We've been very lucky to avoid the theft of any loads. Um, we have we've been close, and I mean, anybody who's been in this industry as long as even we have, with our short tenure of 8 years, the amount of volume that we move, that's always a possibility. So um, really, it's just a
So
matter of making sure SOPs are in place and then following those to the letter.
so
So
it's so it's possible, especially in this day and time.
happens all the
Wow.
time.
I
Yeah.
mean, that
So
to be at zero, have zero theft, it's possible.
yeah, again, I gotta bunk bed next time. Just keep knocking on wood, man. It's like,
Man, yeah. So
it's kind of
wow,
like
that's
damage
amazing.
claims,
That's
right?
great.
Yeah,
That's
it's
great
the
for the
same thing.
insurance.
Like when we talk about damage claims and any kind of OS&D type of situation, right? Which freight theft unfortunately is part of that world. Is I always kind of, when I'm talking to customers as an example and saying, look, for me to, if somebody walks in and says, hey, we're never going to have a damage claim unless you're shipping steel ingots in in a box, like even that, I mean, it's you move stuff around your living room long enough, you're going to ding a wall. You're going to, break a leg off a chair, something. Something is going to happen when you move things the way that we all do, right?
Right.
Point A to point B as quickly and safely as possible. But it would be naive to think that nothing's ever going to go sideways. So it's
Yeah,
a
it'd be
matter of saying,
perfect if you
okay,
just don't
let's
move
try to,
anything.
yeah, yeah, right. If everything was just manufactured right where,
Yeah.
right where it needed to be, that'd be great. But then people like me and people like you'd probably be out of a job. So
Mm.
But yeah, so it's a matter of looking and saying, what do we do when we see warning signs for that? Again, whether it be, damages, whether it be, lost items, whether it be a theft risk. And so that's why I use that example is we didn't have a theft situation, but as things progressed, all of a sudden the carrier drops off communication wise. That's a red flag for us right away to be like, okay, we got to have all eyes on this thing. What's going on? Why is the carrier no longer communicating? In this particular case, I think it was just a situation where the driver was frustrated with the situation. Obviously, a huge hit to his business, and so that's impactful. So we need to be, as the broker, we need to be supportive of that, and just make sure that we engage the right way. So um,
So people
the
don't get desperate. Yeah, I like
yeah,
that.
exactly. A lot of times it's about diffusing the situation. Right, de-escalation is key. Um, and so I think for brokers especially, I think that we have a responsibility to try to help the carriers. And I think unfortunately a lot of the relationships out there between brokers and carriers is pretty sour. And I think that there's responsibility on both sides of that relationship. And so obviously, my folks and myself, we want to control what we can control, which is our behavior and the way that we communicate. And so, when I see folks say, "Oh, this carrier is not communicating," and I go, "Well, hey, let's put ourselves in that driver's position, right?" In this particular case, it's a single owner operator. He just spent $4,500 trying to fix this truck and it didn't work.
Mm.
What do you think his headspace is like right now? Right? This
Mm.
is his business. This is his livelihood. This is how he's going to feed his family and put a roof over their heads. And it's going sideways in a big way right now. And he didn't necessarily do anything wrong. It's just luck of the draw, right? So
Wow.
reaching out that way, the carrier immediately started communicating again. Said, "Hey, how can we help? How
There
can
you
we
go.
help the situation? What can we do for you? We're all in this together." So those can be some big key things as opposed to, coming at him with guns blazing and saying, "Well, you're
Yeah.
out of line," and everything else. It's like the guy's already having a bad day. Let's not make it
Yeah.
worse. And then, sure enough, we got the communication going. And we're able to kind of work through that. So that's a big key.
That's
Um,
awesome, man.
yeah.
Great job.
I- In
Congratulations on that.
speaking, yeah, thank you. In speaking to, I mean, as much as I would love to say it's all us, some of it is luck, but the again going back to that, what do we control, right? Is avoiding freight theft, avoiding fraud. Um,
What's the two
Number
main
one,
SOPs that you
yeah,
go to? Like, that I know you don't want to share your secrets, but
no,
what
that's
what
fine.
can you share?
Nothing that we have is a real big secret when it comes to fraud avoidance, right? So the big keys are making sure we use the tools that are out there. So the big ones I would say is utilizing a fraud prevention software system. There are several out there that are pretty robust. Highway's a big one. Carrier 411 is another. Obviously, Trucker Tools has a lot of different tools out there for brokers and for carriers. I mean, it's a two-way street too, right? It's not like when people hear about freight theft, they think like somebody takes a trailer full of stuff and, runs it to some dark warehouse somewhere. You even see like farmers insurance commercials and things like that. But what happens more often than not, the fraud that we see has nothing to do with stealing physical items. It's about stealing identity of
Mm.
both carriers and brokerages, right? So we have things in place as well where software programs that just constantly look out there and say, "Hey, is our MC being used?" Um, somewhere by somebody else, by a bad actor, or are the carriers that we're working with have maybe somebody has stolen their MC or DOT number and is representing that they're that person. So as we start to line things up, all of a sudden we're paying the wrong party.
Right.
So there's software programs to help us with that. And then from when we get into the physical verification side of that, right? So when we line up a new carrier that we haven't worked with in the past, maybe on a new lane or it's a new commodity type or a new mode of transportation, hey, we normally run vans over this lane and now we need flatbeds, right? Maybe the customer's product that they need to move has changed or the unload has changed. So when we're sourcing those new partners, there's several different pieces. One is we're doing VIN verification on any new setup. So if we set up a new carrier, and they're going to pick something up, we actually get an image of their vehicle identification plate on that tractor.
Mm.
And then it's geolocated as well. So we can tell that they are who they say they are, they're where they say they are, and that the tractor they're using is the tractor that they say they're using, that is then registered under their COI that they're sending us for their insurance. So that's a pretty foolproof way to make sure who you're talking to is really who you're talking to. Um,
So when is there a point that you realize, hey, this is going? I guess the most sensitive area when you do that transaction that you can tell this might go bad. Where is the most sensitive area that we can probably strengthen in this as an industry?
Yeah. So initially, obviously, during setup, right, when we're first starting the relationship between the brokerage and the carrier, is making sure, if there are things that feel off, they probably are, right. And
Okay.
so then asking more questions. We don't want to just 86 that relationship immediately, but when you hear something, you're like, well, wait a minute, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Start digging, right? Start asking more questions. Start making sure that everything is on the up and up, and that responsibility that brokerages have, it also protects the carriers that they work with or that they could potentially work with, right? Because if a carrier has their identification stolen, and now we're allowing that bad actor to take money out of the industry, it's hurting that carrier's reputation as well. So it's on us to make sure that we do everything to help protect everybody.
Right.
Um, so that's a big piece.
Okay. I like it. I mean, it affects a lot of people. I mean, think about the aftermath and who pays, who suffers. When a load is stolen or freight fraud happens, who's taking the biggest hit? What would you say?
So it can depend on the situation, right? So we have seen situations of not a load being stolen, but where identities can be stolen. Um, where we've had to pay carriers because somebody will line up a load, like a double brokering type of a situation, right? Where a bad actor, a brokerage has somebody else's MC that they're using. They're representing themselves as a carrier when they're not a carrier. And then they double broker that load to an actual carrier who's taking that load somewhere. And of course, the red flags that we would see on that are like if somebody, when things are too good to be true, they probably are, is a great indicator of that. So just to
Sure.
kind of map that out, right? Bad actor represents themselves as a carrier with a stolen MC. So they take a, we say, oh hey, here's a load for you guys to carry for us. They obviously don't actually physically go pick up that load. They then turn around and call a legitimate carrier and say, hey, I need you to pick this load up going from Dallas to, whatever, going from Dallas to Kansas City. And so that carrier thinking, oh, okay, I'm working with this legitimate brokerage. Now there's two different identities being stolen. They go pick up that load, they run it to Kansas City, they drop it off, right? That bad actor says, okay, sounds great. We'll get you paid shortly. They invoice my company, representing themselves as a carrier. We pay them. They
Yeah.
never pay the carrier who actually moved the freight, right? So then eventually the carrier goes, well, hey, all of a sudden nobody's communicating with us.
Mm.
And we're saying, hey, where's the POD? And we can't get a hold of anybody, right? And so you end up in this, or they submit a falsified or a forged POD, and now we're not going to be getting paid by our customer, but yet we still need to pay that carrier, right? So it ends up being a situation where everybody loses except for obviously the bad actor in between. So the big keys for us are then reporting that. What we end up finding out is in researching those VIN numbers, um, is making sure that once a VIN number's been stolen, it doesn't take very long for everybody to figure that out. Hopefully, especially if everybody's doing their due diligence, so it can limit the damage. We've also had um, bad actors represent themselves as customers where
Mm.
they're saying, "Hey, we're the shipper. Come pick up at our location at X, Y, and Z." And we had one, I want to say back in late 2017, early 2018, when we were first getting started out. We had a customer. Turned out that the actual customer had no idea They thought that they were working with somebody else. That place ended up being investigated by the FBI. I know that for a fact because they called us asking questions. But
Wow.
uh, essentially, a fraudulent organization represented themselves as a shipper. The actual shipper had no idea that this was happening. They thought they were just working with a legitimate brokerage. And so, same thing, right? Is that we were running loads, paying carriers, and after a little bit, we're like, well, wait a minute, how come this customer's not paying their invoices? Well,
Mm.
then obviously digging deeper, we found out, oh, the person that entity that we've been interacting with isn't actually the shipper.
Yeah.
They're this shadow organization that represented themselves as the shipper when really it's somebody else. So it's amazing how creative some of these criminals can be, and and they build a lot of ways to shadow that, or ways to misrepresent themselves.
Yeah,
So yeah.
that's sad for the industry. Where do you think this is headed? How does someone stay alive in a tough market like this? What do you think? What's your predictions, I guess, as to how it may get better or what people can do?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is building great relationships with organizations, right? So the less I have to go and work with a carrier that I've never heard of before, the less that a carrier has to go and work with a brokerage that they've never heard of before,
Mm.
or don't have a pre-existing relationship, right? The less often that happens, the better off you're going to be, as a
Mm.
general rule, right? When
Nice.
it comes, especially to fraudulent activity, and then just making sure that we always trust but verify, right? Um, so even if I'm working with a carrier that I've worked with for a long time, or if I'm working with a customer that I've worked with for a long time, continuing to look at, hey, what are their credit ratings looking like? Are they starting to get in a situation where they'd be tempted to do some things that aren't on the up and up, to keep things afloat? I mean, I think a lot of the pressures that we see in a market like it's been for the last 3.5 years is that
Mm.
when it's easy to make money in a great market, people are less tempted to do fraudulent things,
Mm.
because they can just go make money on the up and up. I think the harder the market gets and the longer it goes, the more tempted people are to try to do some things to circumvent the process. So
So I kind of think about it on a, I guess, more personal level. I know when the economy is doing well, you don't see so many people doing weird things like towing their cars with a with a rope.
yep, you're right.
Yeah, they get desperate
Absolutely.
and they start doing all kinds of clever things to get the job done. And you're like, man,
Yeah.
that's not safe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and as far as I mean, every time a bad actor creates a way to commit a crime, the industry in self-preservation mode says, hey, we got to find a way to keep this from happening. So we do that, and everybody gets on board with that. And then another month, 2 3 later, oh, now every criminal out there has come up with a new way to circumvent that process, right? So every time that happens, it's always this pendulum swing, right? And that's been going on since privateers. Like, think
Yeah,
about
I think,
shipping across the Atlantic Ocean from Europe to the New World. It was
yeah,
going on then. So they found, we've been finding ways to solve those problems since what, the 1600s,
yeah.
1500s.
I
So
think too, sharing the stories of what people may try to do so that people could
mhm,
be more aware as to some of the tricks that are going on out there. So, like you sharing your story, letting people know that they're not alone. I think it's going to be huge. I think
mhm,
um, long interviews, podcasts, and things like that have helped so many people. So, no, you're definitely a soldier out there for a force for good in the trucking
yeah.
industry. Yeah.
Well, I
Thank you.
think you make a great point there, right? Is that if folks, especially if folks are starting out, is that such a great point? Is that making sure you build a network of people that that you can ask questions. Hey, have you ever seen this? What are some things that have happened? Paying attention to podcasts, paying attention to news articles, right? It's one of those things that we feel like, I'm kind of wasting my time by researching all this stuff, and you're really not, because you're just building your experience, you're building your knowledge based on things that other people have had to go through, right? Kind of like when
Yeah.
we're teaching our kids, it's like, I don't want my kids to make the same mistakes I made
Mm.
throughout life. I want them to learn from my mistakes. It's the same thing in business, right? We want to be able to help each other out. Uh, you know, Everybody helping everybody is only going to make the whole industry better off. So
Yeah.
nothing wrong with
They're,
sharing
the
those
criminals are
stories.
talking amongst each other. They're telling each other what they do. Hey, try this,
Yeah,
do that. So, the good guys,
absolutely.
we gotta stick together too. We gotta help each other
100%.
out. Yeah.
100%.
So, what
Absolutely.
advice do you have for people that are considering being in the brokering business or just helping out? Say, I'm young, I want to try this, want to get into an industry that I'm not sure of. If someone's thinking about becoming a freight broker today, what would you tell them, or what would you need them to know?
So I have three young sons, right? 21 through 16. And if they were to walk up to me tomorrow and say, hey, you know what? I want to do what you do. I want to run a brokerage, or I want to own a brokerage, or I want to start a brokerage. The
Mm,
first thing I would say is learn the industry, right? Either
mm,
go work at a brokerage or go work for a carrier or go drive truck,
yeah.
right? I mean, you want to learn. It doesn't, I get a lot of folks that do ask that, right? And the biggest thing that I say to folks all the time is you need to know it before you can work in it. It'd be like if somebody had never cooked a meal in their life and they want to go open a restaurant, right? It's
Ooh,
you need to know it
ooh, I like
first,
that. I like those common sense
so
ones.
and I think a lot of folks think, oh, I'm gonna go, I got a buddy that works in a brokerage and they make tons of money and blah, 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 blah. It's like, well, I'm 25 years in almost. What is it? It's
Mm,
2020. I'm 19, 20 years in. 20 years of practice, right? 20 years of experiences, 20 years of relationship building and asking questions. So it might look like a piece of cake when you're looking at somebody who's practiced for 20 years. It's the same thing if I'm talking to a driver and they back a 53-foot trailer into a dock between two other trailers like it's nothing, right? I might look at that and be like, oh, well, this should be a piece of cake. Boy, I'll probably rip all three of those trailers apart if I don't
yeah.
have the experience, right? And
16
so
pull-ups.
yeah, exactly. Well, we've all seen it, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
When the guy that's brand new is like on his 40th attempt to bump the dock, and you're like, all right,
yeah,
we're all running out of time here. So
yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing is that as just to be patient and start on step one. Don't try to start on step 20. I think the barriers to entry for becoming a brokerage are very low, but the barriers to entry to becoming a successful broker are that experience piece. And I think people are like, oh, well, I can just go get my MC and file for my bond and grab some insurance and I'm good to go. I can just start right away. I'm not saying that has never worked. I'm just saying that that's when we start talking about you get yourself in some really sticky situations because now you don't have the experience to recognize those fraud red flags, right? And you don't have the network to reach out to people and say, hey, who do I talk to? I've got a legal situation here. And it's putting you at risk. It's putting anybody that work, your carriers that you're working with at risk, putting your customers at risk, of course. So I
How
think
bad
that's
can
the
it get
biggest
for
thing.
your livelihood? Let's say you do have a broker and you got your own insurance bond and things like that. Can someone lose their home?
They can lose their home. Yeah, especially, I mean, you think about it, if you're starting out as a brokerage, you're probably starting as an LLC. You are personally liable. They can go after your personal assets because that's what you're going to have to use to back up for cash flow purposes and things like that. So, yeah, you could lose your home. You could, I mean, it's food off the table. And not only that, when you're talking about fraud prevention, if you don't take the proper steps when the red flags come, you could be culpable on a criminal level, right?
Mm,
So just not knowing isn't an excuse. And
I'll do that.
the legal system isn't going to see it as an excuse either, right? Because I mean,
No.
you think about little, and it's not just fraud, right? Like, so if I have a carrier that's running late, they have a breakdown and they're running late. And I, as a broker, start calling that driver and I say, boy, you better make up that time. My customer needs that freight right now. What am I doing? I'm
Yeah,
putting that person's safety. It's not
yeah,
his fault that I mean, trucks break down.
yeah.
Welcome to trucking, right? You get brokers that'll do that. They'll start pressuring a driver to violate hours of service rules. Next thing you know,
Mm,
that guy's in a wreck. He's hurting somebody. He's hurting himself. He's putting property and lives in danger.
oof.
That's a criminal issue. So
Yeah.
it's not, somebody who's never worked in the industry walks in and says, oh, I'm going to be a broker. It's a piece of cake. And they don't know that it's illegal for a broker to pressure a driver that way. It's not just your home you're risking. You're
Right.
risking, you might be in rough shape. So that would be my recommendation to anybody starting out is, hey, get to know the industry for go work at a brokerage first, or go work for a carrier, or go
Yeah.
work with a carrier, work in the industry, work at a shipper. Get to know all sides. I'm not saying you got to go do it for 20 years, but you're you need to have that background in order to be successful and to keep everybody safe,
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
so
Sometimes people just need to believe in themselves. I know it
mhm,
may sound a little naive, but just encouraging them to do the job right um, goes a long ways. I know as a truck
mhm,
driver myself, you can really hammer somebody. I've seen it happen. I've seen people do it, but that stuff is short lived. I'm glad you
mhm.
mentioned that. That relationship that the broker has with the truck driver, and you hear about these instances going online where people get hurt. I'm not getting bashing the broker, but you don't know why that person has that pressure on them. Why would they be doing that? Um,
Mhm.
Texting and driving, or possibly even using substance
Yeah.
to
Yep.
keep going.
Yep.
I can stay
Staying
awake
awake.
if I do this.
Yeah.
So great
Exactly.
point. I like
Yep.
that. That's the one that we
Absolutely.
think about the freight broker, and you touching on that. There's another side. That's actually more um, the one that's been around the longest is the relationship with the truck driver and the broker. You got to have a healthy one.
Yeah.
Keep it
Absolutely.
healthy.
We're all in it
Yeah.
together. I Last time I checked, we don't own a single truck, so tough for me to move my customers' materials across the country without great drivers, without
Oh,
great partnerships.
how big
So
are you guys? How many brokers or specialists do you
so
have
my
working
team, yep. So my
on your
team is
team?
just over 15. So we don't have a huge, we're not TQL or
That's
some of
pretty
these
good.
bigger outfits, but we got about 15, 16 folks, I think, right now.
Wow.
And we run, we run in the hundreds of loads a week across the country. So we have some key markets that we work in. We do a lot of open deck stuff. We do a lot of work in the kind of industrial and construction sector. A lot of specialized things. A lot of what we do is more project management than it is just picking something up and dropping it off, right? So we go
Okay.
all the way back to scheduling of materials that are coming out of manufacturing plants and then coordinating, hey, how are those going to go into where they're being installed? And working
Nice.
with, the customer's project managers to time, get that timing figured out. So it can get pretty involved. But again, it just goes back to asking questions and learning and, you know, like your podcast, you talk about, well, what's something somebody can do to become a broker? Well, there's a lot, we live in the day and age of YouTube and podcasts and everything else. There's a lot
Free,
of information
free
out there
information.
for people for free. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it's not like back in the day where you had to go sign up for truck driving school and learn it from step one. Right now you
Mm.
can learn from other folks input. There's a lot of information being put out there all the time.
Just
um
another side piece for someone who's getting started. They look at these low boards and say, "All right, I can afford that per month," and all the work is right there. Versus going out and establishing those networks and those relationships by getting contracts. Um, I think there's two different ways. There may be even a third that I don't know about. But what would you say as to using the spot board or the low boards? I'm not saying I think a lot of them are great, but
mhm.
should you start in that area, or would you prefer to do a contract, start small and grow that way?
So if I'm a broker,
Yeah.
I typically use the load boards for, because like you see a lot of things about like load lists as well, right?
Mm,
I don't know that I've ever booked a load with a customer from a load board. But
mm,
that's where we get a lot of our initial carrier relationships, is talking with folks like that. Posting a load up and trying to cover it that way can be really risky, right?
mm.
So we try to talk to carriers directly. Sometimes we'll get, contact information, obviously, by looking at load boards and things like that. But you just have to be really cautious, right? The easier it is from a it's a
Yeah,
tricky way to say it, right? Like sometimes if something feels like it's a really easy way to do something,
it's
there's
probably the hard way.
probably somebody that's yeah, there's probably somebody that's like, oh, somebody who wants to do things the easy way is going to be
Mm.
easier to take advantage of too. So
That sounds like something you would
um
tell your kids.
exactly. You take the easy
Yeah.
way out, you're going to pay eventually, right? You're
Yeah.
going to pay eventually. And sometimes it ends up being worse the long run. So, yeah,
You
I
can
mean,
take, yeah.
we utilize load boards every day, but we use them for, more informational purposes than anything else, I think is the key.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
then,
no,
creating those initial steps to a relationship for sure. But yeah, we need to, just got to stay vigilant, man. Got to stay vigilant.
nice.
It's as
All
soon
right.
as you're asleep at the wheel, that's when things get crazy. So,
So look, moving forward, just looking at the industry, what do you think AI or technology piece is going to help out with brokerage, or maybe even take something away?
Well, so it's again, it's both sides of that coin, right? Is that we're utilizing AI, even within my organization, to, expedite processing of information and data, right? Using AI agents to take data that we need to come in on one side and come out the other, rather than having a human being doing that. You can train an AI program to handle a lot of that workload, speeds it up, makes it more efficient. Now that person has more time to do other things like vetting out carriers, or searching for solutions that were maybe more on the creative side. Um, where that human element is still a very big piece. I know there's a lot of folks out there that think, oh yeah, they're taking over the world and they're going to put everybody out of a job. Like I'm a little, I mean, maybe it's because I'm an old man, but I think we're a little ways off from that yet. When I ask Siri to do something for me, half the time she gets it wrong. So I think we got a ways before we got to worry too much. But it's definitely a
Yeah.
tool to be utilized. In that same breath, fraudulent actors are also using AI to find ways to create false information, to create opportunities for them to get things that they don't deserve. So it's a two-sided coin, right? Like we can use AI to solve problems, but there are folks that are going to use AI for nefarious purposes as well. So
Well, yeah, it's almost like the technology is helping people do it the easy way, which could be to the detriment of the quality that we need. But
again,
again, I love technology. I think it's great. I think it's a great tool. I use it here on the show as well. So we just got to stick together, like you said, keep those networks. Don't isolate yourself. Some of those great things that they told us to do in 2020, just try to get out of there. But yeah, don't be just
yeah,
by yourself, a lone wolf. Yeah, yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
All right. Well, final thoughts, any takeaways? What's one of the biggest thing that shippers you want them to understand about brokers? Maybe there's something that some misconceptions out there. Maybe we can help some of that mythbusters
Yeah,
break people free from them.
I think it's, for shippers, it's the same thing when you're looking at working with brokerages. Is I think a lot of focus in the industry when it comes to fraud and all that stuff. It's just kind of, not to beat a dead horse, but it goes back to those relationships, right? Is that it's funny, like most of my selling to new prospects or to new relationships, or even to existing customers that we have when we're adding new locations across the country, is we physically go and meet with them. And I'm always amazed at how surprised folks in the shipping office are to see a broker, right? Carriers obviously have been doing that for decades, but I think building real relationships with people that you can actually talk with and share ideas. If I was a shipping manager, I would want that connection. I would want it with my carriers. I would want it with the brokerages that I use. And, it's funny because I think brokers complain a lot about how hard it can be to build those relationships with a shipper. But I personally see it as an advantage, because if we can build a real relationship, offer real value, right? It's just not just a price play. Everybody kind of benefits from that, right? There's always going to be somebody out there who can give you a better deal, $5 cheaper. But is it really going to be giving you a better opportunity to improve your supply chain?
Wow.
Um, Now, got to be market competitive as well, right? It doesn't mean that you can just, I don't drive a Porsche, right? I need to be able to get from point A to point B, and I don't want something that's going to break down, but I also don't need it to be a luxury item either, right? So you got to
Yeah.
find that balance. So as a shipper, I think the biggest thing is just same. Brokers and carriers need great relationships, and shippers, when they're looking for brokerages, they need to find somebody that is willing to do the hard work, which is build the relationship first, find
Yes.
ways to add value, right? If I'm onboarding a brokerage just to save a couple extra bucks, I'm probably just making it worse for the folks that I already have relationships with, as well as that new guy. It's not going to last very long, because
Mm,
eventually the truck driver is going to go, look, I can't take these loads. I have to be able to pay for fuel. I have to pay for insurance. I have to be able to pay for the upkeep of my truck. I got to feed my family and put a roof over their heads as well.
wow.
So it's got to be realistic for everybody involved. So, you mentioned during COVID, and we all saw the beginning of that, where rates were falling through the floor before the big wave started, right?
Yeah.
And we were I had guys on my team that I was like, call that carrier back. You're paying them more than that. You're not getting,
Nice.
they'd be like, oh, I just booked a load for 80 cents a mile. I'm like, you can't fuel a truck for 80 cents a mile.
Okay.
Call them back because we don't own any trucks. If all these carriers go out of business that are partners of ours in this relationship,
Nice.
we're not going to be able to move anything. We need them.
That's awesome.
It's got to be sustainable, right? So
Yeah.
just, gotta keep those
Yeah.
things in mind. So yeah, same thing for the shippers, right? As if we get a great price, but we drive all of our partners out of business in the process, it's not going to last very long.
Yeah, I like that. You're protecting you're protecting the industry instead of degrading it. I mean, that's huge, man. Big ups to you for doing that and to pass that along to someone that's not as experienced as yourself. Like, what's one lesson you would pass on to your younger self if you could, see yourself? You say, man, that individual, I could see where they're headed. It's just like me. What would you say?
Be patient and treat everybody the way you want to be treated. So we
That's
work in a
perfect.
stressful business. It's freight never sleeps. It is 24/7, 365.
Yeah.
And I think just being patient with folks. I think I was a bit of a hothead, growing up in on the dock
Okay.
overnights, working freight in the middle of the night on 20 below days, and
Yeah.
tensions can run high, tempers can flare. And I think growing up in that side of the business, I developed some bad habits. And as
Mm,
I've gotten older, realized, hey, I wouldn't like it if somebody talked to me this way in a stressful situation. Um,
yeah.
I need to
Perfect.
change my behavior. So that's probably the biggest adjustment I've made over the last 5+ years is learning to, like I said in the beginning, right, learning to de-escalate,
Nice.
so that we can get the key communication in place and make sure everybody knows, hey, we're all on the same team here. Trying to move
Yeah.
stuff from. It's not that
I
complicated,
mean,
right? I mean, it's point A to point B as safely
yeah.
and quickly as possible.
Right.
We're all on the same team at the end of the day, I think, and that's a big key. So
Well, Jason, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on, being so open about this side of the industry. Freight fraud and cargo theft aren't talked about enough. I think the conversation like this we need to keep having with individuals like yourself to protect ourselves and the industry so that we continue to make better decisions. So, to everyone out there listening, if you're in the freight industry and you're thinking about getting into it, or just making a change, or even just doing what you're doing to do it better, to take it more seriously. Keep asking questions, stay alert, and don't assume that everyone's playing fair. So, if this episode's helped you, please sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it to someone else that needs to hear it. So, thank you so much for coming on the show, Jason.
you
Um,
bet.
did you want to share who you work for, or you don't have
Yeah.
to?
So my company is 10 Logistics. We're based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Really appreciate this opportunity. Anytime we have a chance to connect with other folks in the industry is always a good thing. So a lot of stuff out there that needs to be moved. So I'm not much of a protectionist when it comes to information.
What's the
But
best way for people to reach out to maybe talk to you or
yeah,
10 Logistics?
absolutely. Best way to reach us, our general email inbox is shipit@10logistics.com. So that's ship it at 10logistics.com. General office number is 612-845. Oh, wait a minute. What is it? 612-902-8620. So those are the two best ways to reach us. And we're always there 24/7, 365. Freight never
Nice.
sleeps, my friend.
All right. Until next time, that's delivered.